Good morning, everyone. We will be with you shortly. As usual, for everyone watching, broadcasting on YouTube, a little housekeeping, broadcasting on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitch, all the other usual places. If you or someone that's watching on your mobile phone, and when you switch to check your email, texts, whatever, and your audio shuts off, switch over to the LinkedIn app or the Twitch app, and watch via that way. And when you put us in the background, you'll still be able to hear it. But we're going to get this show started. Just a moment. I think now may be a good time. Good day, everybody. September 28th, 2023, and welcome to DYOR Live. We've got a great show for you today. We've got Pedro Garcia, the crypto chart analyst, giving us some alpha about what's going on in BTC and the rest of the markets. And our special guest of the day, Koleya Karringten of the Canadian Blockchain Association. Koleya is going to be on talking all about what her association is doing, not only here in Canada, but around the world to further the world of blockchain. So let's get this show started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the show. I love those intros. I love it every time I hear that music. You gotta love those AI music creator things where you just pick kind of the tone, and it gets it right. It gets what you want to hear to get you going in the morning. Anyway, it's a good week. Good week. This is our second show of the week. We're not been on that much this week, but we still got a good show for you today. As I said in the intro, have a little bit about the market and what's going on for it. But before we get to that, some good things going on with the DYOR Media Network here. Wanted to point out some, where is that? Oh, got to get the right one here. This one. Nope, not that one. This one here. Let's turn the TV on here. I got a new episode of Rugged, Ruined, and Wrecked out. Season 3, Episode 7. It's likely going to be the last episode of Season 3. We've been doing Rugged, Ruined, and Wrecked for, 3 seasons. We're getting ready to do the 4th season. 2 years of it now of scams, rug pulls, honeypots, projects that have just failed because of malfeasance, as they say, from their owners or bad management and stuff like that. It's a good show, 20 minutes of fun, laughter, and what I always say is we use entertainment. We use entertainment to educate people so they can do their own research and learn all about things. Other news coming up later today, one of my past guests on my show here, Patrick Doherty, is an attorney, former attorney for the SEC, and has been on my show to talk about the legal aspects of various cases going on. And he is also, he represents Coinbase. And he's very famously said on my show that he took Coinbase to get registered with the SEC, and it didn't work out. And he said, "I got rug pulled by the SEC." It was a nice bit of humor from an attorney. Attorneys who are otherwise usually not so humorous. But he is having a show today at 11 o'clock, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And he's on a panel discussion. I don't know if you can see the name here, but he's with Patrick McHenry. Patrick McHenry is the House Financial Service Committee's chairman right now. He's the ranking Republican on the committee. and they're going to be talking all about regulation and what Congress is going to be doing. What the Republican House is going to be doing. See if they can get the Senate to concur to further the regulatory climate in the U.S. And as I said in the intro to the show and in the body of the various promos I did, I said Canada's been doing a great job promoting the digital asset industry, and also has been and their regulatory climate has been a little bit better. Not great, but a little bit better than, as they say, our neighbors to the south. I happen to be sitting in Canada right now, so I can say our neighbors to the south, but I'm an American, and so I follow the American government highly. And listening to Patrick here, he's not a supporter of by any means, even though he worked for the SEC at one point. He's now a partner in a law firm that handles digital asset cases, and he's very knowledgeable about the topic. Go find the Federalist Society. Just Google Federalist Society in their events page, and it'll be on there. I'd say put it in the links, but you'll be watching this after that, and the link will be different. Anyway, Pedro Garcia, the crypto chart analyst. Pedro, it's time for your morning alpha about what's going on in the markets. What's going on in the markets?
Most stuff, man. Hey guys, how you guys doing? Hope everybody's doing well this morning.
Doing well, Pedro. Doing well.
Excellent. So just real quick, just a disclaimer. Remember, this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please, if you do decide to make decisions based off whatever I do, it is not financial advice. In addition,
and I have the scroller running on top there for everyone out there. It's just saying just that.
Excellent. All right, so real quick, we'll just jump right into this. So we've seen the market here come up into the level of the 27.5 to the 723 area. Like I said, I said more of that, like the 26 coming up to that 26.5 to that 27.5 area. You see how we bounced off of this? This is a weekly higher time frame. At the time we've come down now because it was last week, but we've come down off of this level here. Now we're headed towards the lower part here. What was interesting this week, and this is what I brought up, I said I do see us going down to the lower levels here, like I've talked about, that 23,000 and as well as the 20,000 mark, and then after that 15,000 mark. The thing that I want to bring up is this, is as the market starts to continue, if we do start to continue up, what we need to see is a break and close and retracement of that 30,000 mark. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is we're starting to see, I didn't expect to see, as even though we still have a little amount of volume, we are seeing volume coming to the upside. So potentially this could be a way that they might try to do it, or they might try to bring it up. If they do, this is what we need to see. We need to see it close above this white line right here on a daily and weekly. We need to see it go up to maybe the 40,000, come back.
I can't see that on the screen. What does that white line price represent?
Oh, this is 31,000. I apologize.
Okay. And
so this basically represents our previous high. The key is this, is because this is the halfway mark of what we've been talking about, or since the drop of the 67,000, or 67,000. This is about the halfway mark. We need to see a close above here, okay? Rally up into this level here, and then come back down on this white line and close with big volume. So I'm gonna put that up simply because I don't think we're gonna go there, but because as a trader, you're always looking at it's everything's probability, right? My job is to look and gauge which direction the market is happening right now. I still think this is a sideways market like we saw right here. I still feel like we're not seeing a lot of volume, but taking a step back and looking at this last little bit right here, I realized, there's a little bit more green bond than what I expected. So potentially they potentially could see a little Christmas rally. So that's the other thing that I want to bring up. Rallies.
Christmas rally is always good, Pedro.
Yeah.
It means the January 20th sell-off to pay the credit card bills.
That's exactly what that is. So the reason why I bring
we've been talking about the doldrums of the market, this bear market, the low volume, and in those cases, the price just starts to naturally decrease. We're also watching the institutions. What we figure is push the market down so they can really buy in level. Where are those? on your chart, where are those buying levels where you're seeing those big orders just sitting there waiting to be filled?
Yeah, it's the one. So it's the 24,000 potential, and then as well as that 20,000 potential, the 15,000 potential. Potentially, I think we're going to sell through that. We're gonna tap right below it, like the 15,000, and then go right back up, hit to that 20,000, and then sell off. After that, the next level is a 10,000. I don't have a marked here simply because I don't think we're going to stop there. I don't think we're going to stop at the 10,000 mark. I think we're going to come down to that 6,000.
Well, I know your charts have been right a lot. I think the institutions will help push it down, but I don't think it'll be that far. But I got to tell you, if the volume stays low and there's not in those buy order, if there's that big gap in the window where the buy orders are, it could fall pretty quickly.
That's the key. Is right here. Is that 15,000? This right here.
You need to find a liquidity level in there and some orders.
Yes.
It doesn't look like there's one yet.
Exactly. You're nailing it. Is we need to find liquidity, and we don't have any until we get down to these lower levels. And so I guess the next one is that 24,000. Next one after that is a 20,000 mark. So.
All right. Well, what? Just quickly, we're running out of time here for this segment. What's coming up in the next day or two? Just kind of more consolidation, or any? No big news items coming up at all.
No, I mean, from a traditional financial side, from the TriFi, it's really, everything's still very bearish. There's not a lot of stuff. And everybody knows that the government statistics here in America is pretty much just falsifying until the real numbers come out. They don't even really look at the original numbers, right? So the first numbers that come, they're like, okay, whatever, that's for the algorithms. Now let's give us the real numbers. So it's really interesting.
All right, All right, Pedro, thank you for the info. Stick around, and we'll be on later to talk more about stuff. And
with Mrs.
Just redid the buttons on this thing, and I can't always get it right. Is that the right one? That's not the right. That's the right one. Anyway, I'd like to take this moment. Thank you, Pedro, very much for that. I'm going to take this moment to, as they say, pay the bills a little bit. As many of you know, Auditchain sponsors my show here over my shoulder here. Auditchain is a group based out of Zug, Switzerland. That they've developed a new way to use a logic and reasoning engine and a little bit of AI, declarative AI, to audit financial statements submitted by any company that reports on the major exchange or a major regulatory agency of the world. 100 jurisdictions and 100 regulatory agencies in 60 jurisdictions. They can load at anyone's 10Qs, 10Ks, whatever they are, and run them, and it will tell you if there's an error in them or not. Something that takes the audit companies months to figure out can now be done in a few minutes. It's the most amazing thing. But instead of having me tell you about it, as I always like to say, let's have me tell you about it. Most of you know that crypto exchanges have been taking a beating about transparency, and many groups out there are trying to solve that. But Auditchain has already done that. Auditchain's protocols and network of validators can mathematically prove that a company's entire financial state, not just proof of reserves, but a proof of state, and whether or not that company is providing accurate reporting and information to the respective government regulators and to the public. Seriously, you and I can check crypto companies and traditional companies' financial reports for transparency and accuracy using a logic and reasoning engine called Pacioli that records its output where? On the blockchain. Seriously, ladies and gentlemen, blockchain technology is now able to be used to check on traditional companies. Behind me is a list of companies that comprise the S&P 500, S&P 100. In essence, the largest U.S. companies by size. More than one quarter, 29 out of 100, have problems with their reports. Remember, accounting and other corporate systems are garbage in and garbage out. So if there are problems with the data out for these companies, in red here, what does that mean? That's right, ladies and gentlemen. There are problems with the data going in. And this was figured out not by accounting or auditing firms and fleets of consultants. This was compiled and reported on by Auditchain's Pacioli validating nodes and took only 5 minutes. It's revolutionary, and it's a disruptor technology. Auditchain. Oh, those things are supposed to auto come off there, and these transitions and I'll get it one of these days. Anyway, auditchain.finance, go find them. Really good stuff. They're just coming to market right now. They're out there. They're hiring. They're bringing on clients. All is going great with them. It's a real product. There's no. They do use a token to power their validating nodes, but the point is they are not in the token business or investing in a token business. It's just for the gas fee. They have a great accounting software that gets in there and tells them. I think we did one live once on the air. I think we did Tesla's books live, and it came back with all these errors on it. Tweeted that to Elon, but he didn't go for it. Let's see. We're getting to the fun part of the show, which I really like here, and that is the guests. I always like to tell everybody that I use this show not just to bring information to the guests and to the people that watch the show and all that, but for me as a learning experience too. And every time I do this, it broadens my knowledge up. And today's guest, Koleya Karringten, has been out there, and you see her in all sorts of places in the world, from Miami to all parts of Canada, New York. Her Canadian Blockchain Consortium is, as they say, doing a bang-up job promoting the blockchain industry, mining, and advancing that from a regulatory point of view and from a knowledge point of view on it. And I've watched her organization grow. I'm in Ottawa, and they're based out of Calgary, but it's really a nationwide event. And recently, she brought she was visiting Montreal for a mining conference there, and all sorts of great stuff came out of that. And instead of me talking about it, I'd like to bring Koleya on the stage here. Let's see if I can get this one right. Koleya, welcome to the show. I appreciate your time and coming on. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, good. I'm glad I finally got together here with you. We've been traveling in the LinkedIn circles for a while, but the important thing is that we get the conversation going and bring good information out. Recently, you were in Montreal for the I can't remember the official name of the conference, but the Bitcoin Mining Association, Bitcoin mining event. Tell us what that was and what you learned at the event.
Definitely. So the Blockchain Consortium, we do what we call our cross-country tour. We do events from coast to coast, all the way from BC to Atlantic Canada. And our event this year in Montreal was basically powering Bitcoin mining, powering economic growth. So how miners can actually create value within regions outside of just particularly minting Bitcoin. So some of the conversations that came out of that were some of the larger mining companies are in smaller regions like Juliet and other ones, and they become some of the largest power purchasers, which also makes them some of the largest taxpayers. They're the ones that are bringing in high-speed internet and fiber optics into smaller rural areas. They're the ones with some of the highest paying average wages in those particular areas. They're also developing out academic programming through their educational institutions and then hiring based on the people that go through those programs. So there's a lot of synergies that come out of Bitcoin mining. A lot of people think that, oh, it's mining, it's, detrimental to the environment and, it doesn't support renewables. Well, actually, close to 86% of mining is currently on renewables, and the majority of mining in Quebec is actually on hydroelectric, which is a very
that's amazing. It's free.
Yeah.
Well, it's not free, but it's there and it's powered by gravity.
Well, exactly, right? So it's not being used on coal. It's not creating detriment to the environment. A lot of people tend to believe that, electricity is a cleaner source than, say, something like natural gas, which if you look at the lithium cobalt, the recyclability, the carbon offset from an electric vehicle versus like a diesel vehicle. The electric vehicle is actually higher, and it confuses a lot of people just understanding that. So when they think of Bitcoin mining, they go, oh my goodness, look how negative it is. And it's like, well, actually, it creates so much value. We know of mining facilities that are revitalizing small towns where originally it was used with a different form of mining, more of your mineral mining, and larger corporations had abandoned those towns. And now these mining companies are able to go and revitalize it, bring back commerce to these areas, bring back tax revenues to these areas.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what I spoke to someone just the other day that is coming up with new ways to commoditize the electricity used for Bitcoin mining, or any mining in general. And one of the things they're doing is taking the waste heat from their miners and running it through a heat pump to add the heat to your house. And a heat pump works in reverse also, and so it can also cool your house. And I'm like, and you get paid for it because you're mining. Now, obviously, a single miner or small group of them doesn't make a lot, but it offsets the cost. And if you can say Bitcoin mining now can cool my house, it blows the mind of what it can do, the technology.
It can do like in-floor heating. It could heat your hot tub. It could grow food for your greenhouse. So one of the largest waste products that come from mining isn't technically a waste, especially if you live in North America, like above the 49th parallel, heat, right? So you can create a completely circular economy with taking the heat, because miners need to disperse that heat for the mining. And you can use that heat in greenhouses. You can use that heat for buildings. You can use that heat. Like there's one mining company that's actually offsetting the cost for a school. And they're going in and they said, hey, look, we'll take on your natural gas bill. Let us use your electricity and gas. They're powering their mining operation. They're covering the cost of gas. They're also giving them like a small kind of like a donation in crypto towards their education. But now the school is getting all the heat that it requires and is now saving money on their operational costs because miners are coming in finding win-win solutions like that.
I traditionally was behind the curve on mining, and I got into crypto much later than a lot of people. And so learning about it, I also fell for the trope that Bitcoin mining was anti-green, and it was kind of during when I should say Mr. Self-promoter Elon talked about using Bitcoin, taking Bitcoin for purchases, and then said, I'm not taking Bitcoin for Teslas because it's anti-green. And the whole industry is like, wait, what? And but the media ran with it. The media ran with it and created this large-scale narrative that fell victim even into Canadian politics. And really worked its way through an election cycle here as well. And then when you look at the numbers, you can see like just Visa, that the merchant terminals that Visa uses more electricity. There's industries like the aluminum industry. There's thousands of industries that use tons of electricity, yet they're not getting beat up by it. And I mentioned this. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. Well, I find it fascinating because people don't tend to get perspective, right? So they don't look at like multiple different data touch points and then come to a conclusion. A lot of people tend to go with whatever mainstream CNN comes at them with. So if you look at, people are very excited about things like artificial intelligence. ChatGPT is going to take up maybe 10x the processing power, the data center requirement for you to be able to use your little chat bots and be able to make your face look different and all that kind of nonsense, things that don't actually create a lot of tangible value. People are not paying attention to the fact that you will require an astronomically higher amount of energy consumption to power the data centers for ChatGPT. Not to mention things like the metaverse. People are now fascinated by the metaverse. They want to do business in the metaverse. All of these woke corporations are talking about, how they have to reduce their environmental footprint. It's like, well, what do you think your environmental footprint looks like when you have the processing power from data centers behind this three-dimensional internet world that you're now using? And the value it's creating is basically more waste products. You're trying to get people to buy more things that eventually go into landfills as opposed to minting sound money. So there's very little perspective that gets given at this. Brick and mortar e-commerce, the amount of energy that's required for that. Traditional banking, Like if you think about the trucks that have to go around picking up cash, all of the banks, all of the money that has to be transferred, the data centers behind that, Facebook, Amazon, all of these companies are producing like a higher carbon footprint than Bitcoin mining. But people and Bitcoin mining also creates a lot more value on much different ends as well. So it's really fascinating. It's hard to kind of create that education out there because the media doesn't exactly spin a fair narrative. They just give one kind of small clip on something and go, oh, that's the truth. That's the story.
Well, how long have you been at it here with the Canadian Blockchain Consortium?
Since 2017.
All right, 2017 was a big year in crypto because it was the first real big year of adoption in which everyone lost their minds, and they all first succumbed to the disease we all now know called FOMO. And but it was a good year. It got a lot of people in. It started the education process for the majority of people that are in the market now. How have you seen the industry in Canada specifically change from the time you got in till today?
I'd say that the shift has definitely been more from like a kind of a grassroots movement of individuals that were curious about sound money, or there wasn't a lot of institutional investors. There wasn't a lot of talk of enterprise blockchain. There wasn't a lot of companies that were trying to go public at that time either. So I'd say from 2017 to now, just people's general awareness, adoption has also dramatically increased. I think 13% of Canadians or more now actually hold Bitcoin, where before in 2016, 2017, it was more like 2 to 3%. So massive adoption increase, which is great. You're starting to see institutional investors come in. We're now seeing our regulators are really coming to the table. From 2017, we also saw, or 2018, we saw like Quadriga happen in Canada. We saw Einstein exchanges happen in Canada. And it really put us ahead of the curve when our regulators came in and said, okay, let's collaboratively work together on this, because this is something where we need to make sure consumers are protected. So all the exchanges that are sitting here in Canada right now are like, we want to create credibility in this space. We want people to know that their assets are safe. Custody was a big issue that the exchanges went through working with the regulators. So we started working on custody a long time ago. It's not exciting to note, but it's meaningful to note that an FTX couldn't have happened in Canada the way that our regulatory process is currently set up. So it does put us ahead of the curve, where people originally were looking like, oh, this is too strict of a market. We don't want to come into Canada. The regulators are too heavy-handed. But based on their more slow and methodical process, based on the fact that there was a lot of industry consultation and engagement, we now have a regulatory process that gets companies all the way from a pre-registration undertaking all the way to, it's now called CIRO, but it was IROC, registered, which creates a lot of credibility. We have a lot more of these companies that are publicly traded. And we're also seeing an interesting kind of consolidation. So all these mergers and acquisitions that are coming in. So like the WonderFi group coming in now, there's BitBuy, and there's CoinSmart, and there's Coinberry, there's CoinSquare, right? So all of these companies are now starting to come under different umbrellas. And each exchange has kind of like meaningful value propositions that they offer into the Canadian economy. It's exciting that we're seeing companies like Coinbase coming into Canada, and Kraken looking at Canada, and all willing to work with our regulators because they see Canada as a market, because the fact that we have clear regulatory guidance.
Yeah, stable regulations, right?
Still work to go. Like it's not amazing, but I'd say if we look at ourselves globally, maybe not America's who we'd peg ourselves against, because they're a bit of a dumpster fire, but other companies like countries like Bahamas or Bermuda, they have some really good frameworks there. UK is developing out some too.
Well, I've been watching the El Salvador thing going, and they've obviously had their issues with it during the price decline of BTC, but they've created a nice little microeconomy in that down there. And being the first isn't always the best at something, but sometimes it at least gives the visibility that's needed. And they have businesses setting up shop. They have companies from the U.S. moving to El Salvador. I mean, nobody ever did that before, and now they are, because as you just explained, having a good regulatory climate that companies can count on. They'll set up shop as long as they have they know what to expect, even if the regulations are difficult. like getting a license in Dubai. Everyone says, oh, it's a great place to do it. Still difficult to get a license, but it's fair. Once you get the license, you're good to go. And same with El Salvador. Obviously, there's a lot of other issues, probably a lot of potential in South America, but like you said, it's or in Central and South America, it's difficult down there with the regulatory, or I should say, just the stability of government climate.
Yeah, that would be a consideration, but also banking. I think that not enough thought goes into the actual access you're going to have to banking. Like you could set up in Panama all day long, but how easy it is for you to take those funds that come into a Panamanian bank and send them somewhere else, right? So it's based on banking relationships that these jurisdictions have with other banks around the world to create that kind of liquidity that you're looking for. So,
were you you focus a lot on mining? Are you a miner, or were you ever a miner at one point?
So what got me into the space was actually mining. That was kind of like my first entry point. More of a hobbyist. I was building probably 12 card multi-GPU rigs in my basement, and I had way too many of them going to the point where I was like heating my kids at a house and home.
Everyone's like, what's going on down there?
It was way too hot. It was like one of those areas where you're like, okay, I need my bathing suit downstairs. While he's like twinkling. Like, all right, this is too hot. But I did find it really fascinating. It got me to read a lot of white papers. Yeah, it was hot.
Sorry, I seem to have just a smidge of a delay on the microphones here, so it overlaps. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Sorry, no worries.
But the mining aspect is I tinkered a little bit with a while ago, running a Litecoin mining rig, and it was just a disaster. Just the setup of it, and getting it to work right, and then what I realized at the time, the room I had it in, while the breaker said it was a 15 amp breaker, it was effectively an 8 amp breaker, and so all I did was blow the power in the room all the time. Extension cords running across. I just gave it up. I was in a pool, wasn't producing much anyway, so I was like, well, I gave it a shot. I learned about it, but that was enough of that. So, what do you see? As I like to talk about the future in Canada, there's this amazing natural resource areas that we've touched on before, and for that matter, the U.S. too has amazing natural resources. And mining isn't regulated so much now in the U.S. It depends on which way Congress goes and the administration, if they're going to treat it as a tax. And, Joe Biden famously equated crypto traders and miners to criminals, a couple of months ago. And it was a shock listening to him say that. But we just had someone post that Texas is now the top Bitcoin mining state with 28% of the hash rate in the U.S. What would you say that the leader is in Canada for mining? Where's the biggest hash rate coming from?
Currently, probably Quebec. I would say it has
the hydro.
Ones that you have. Like you have Bitfarms, you have Sato, you have Hive, and then from there you have like Iris Energy and some other ones in BC. I think Alberta is going to become one of the largest destinations for mining based on the fact that we have a friendly government, we have an abundance of natural gas and clean energy, we have one of the lowest tax jurisdictions. So we're currently collaborating with our Alberta government on a roadmap strategy for how could we start developing this out here? What's the possibilities? What would the GDP look like? How could it benefit taxpayers? One of the things right now, we know there's a moratorium on renewable energy coming, new projects coming into Alberta. And part of that is just renewables still aren't a stable supply of energy to people when you need it. And living in such a harsh climate with 8 months of the year requiring to have your heating on, every renewable facility would have to have a natural gas facility to back that up as an offset, just in case the renewables didn't supply the right amount of power, where Bitcoin mining could come in and support the expansion of that grid, where the government wouldn't have to basically develop any subsidies. Bitcoin miners could be early stage buyers of this, support load balancing, and support that grid expansion to the point where it can create more stabilization or of access for that energy for the end consumer. So those are some of the things where mining can actually support green energy coming through.
I have I brought up on the screen for the viewers to see a tweet you put out about there's been so much misinformation about environmental impact of Bitcoin. So many large new projects like these new ones here in Alberta will be powering mining with renewable energy. And I thought that's been a couple of the topics we've talked about today. Hit on that single tweet, hit on a bunch of these topics and all that. And so we've mentioned Quebec. As a side note, I remember the first time I went to a really big dam. I saw it once in Tennessee and then once in Quebec. And I saw this giant glowing red rod to the side of the dam. I asked the person that worked at the dam, the overlook area, I'm like, what is that thing? And they said, oh, I can't remember the name of it, but when the dam produces too much electricity, instead of burning or spinning turbines down, they'll just bleed off the heat into like the element on your oven, but a giant, huge iron rod, and just heats up, burns off the extra electricity. And I was like, wow, that's interesting the way they do that. It was like a year later when I was like, wait a minute, that's free electricity that we could use for mining. And I was like, oh, then it occurred to me. I said, oh, the hydro industry it can't be more perfect for this, for Bitcoin mining, things like that.
Well, the other thing is so energy, there's not a lot of energy storage at current, right? So when people maybe not realize that energy producers are required to produce peak load amounts of electricity at all times, whether it's being used or not. You could be using a quarter, like as a province, we could be using a quarter of that or a half of that, but all of that is constantly being produced to make sure that if there was the demand, that could match it. So focusing on the consumer of the energy, focusing on the producer of the energy, because that's where a lot of emissions are coming from, as opposed to just the right. companies that are consuming it. Like if you have that much abundant energy available and you cannot store that energy, you're basically creating waste by not using it. But they're mandated to create that amount of electricity at all times.
Right. And so many people think of storage of energy as like a battery or those giant Tesla battery farms you see now. One of the things that I've learned in California, I think Quebec's doing it too, is you store energy just by pumping water up to a higher level. And then when you need it, you just release it and turn a turbine to run and power electricity. There's no chemicals. There's no you didn't need to mine lithium to build batteries. You just when the electricity rates are cheap, you pumped water up to a higher area, and then when you want to run your miners or run your get that energy out of it, you just turn on a turbine and gravity does the work. I've learned so much from this industry, just about how the general day-to-day physics that you were taught in elementary school has come to play. Pedro, I brought you back on the show. Usually Pedro has some questions for our guests also.
Absolutely.
And so I forgot. So if you've got a question for Koleya, feel free to ask Pedro. But before we get into that, Koleya, what do you see coming up with? I know I don't like to bring politics into it too much, but and I like to say it softly. What do you see that the concept of all of this is been poo-pooed, as they say, with Canadian politics lately on the federal level? Have you seen that starting to change, the winds of that start to change as that blockchain technology starts kind of taking over the financial industry and a lot of other industries? Have you seen acceptance of that at the federal level more than in the past?
I would say that the federal government it's appreciated that they did the House of Commons. They put together a committee to basically do more research, have a better understanding of the space. They hosted a series of interviews. I think the majority of our members were part of the response for that. And they came out with about 16 different points. Didn't agree with every one of their 16 points, but the general consensus is that they actually see value in this industry. They see the job creation, they see the opportunities that are coming with it, and that was led by a Liberal member of Parliament. So hopefully that is showcasing our federal government is seeing this as a new and emerging industry that is going to benefit the Canadian economy. For us, or I guess I'll speak for myself personally at this point, I'd love to see this as a completely nonpartisan issue, right? Like we saw it polarized just based on the opposition and our current leader, not quite seeing eye to eye on the value of this industry. And based on that, we don't want to see another oil and gas industry, right? Like, so you see the Conservatives support it, all of a sudden Liberal NDP completely against it. And based on that, we're seeing a lot of stalls within our industry, which really doesn't need to happen because the energy industry. Yeah. Yeah, she's a beautiful Siberian. The energy industry supports Canada, right? Like Alberta creates the largest amount of wealth that gets dispersed across all the other countries, and not supporting this energy industry really doesn't make any sense at the end of the day. So if they politicize this industry and we see Conservative support and we don't see Liberal NDP support,
right,
we're not going to have a lot of good cohesion, good opportunities within this country. So if it can become nonpartisan, just seen as part of the broader technology industry, that would be ideal for the whole country.
Well, it's the same in the U.S. from the U.S. perspective, as we can see from the polarization of the two parties. In the U.S., you have Elizabeth Warren leading the charge, saying no, and we have Patrick Henry in the Republican side saying yes. In the industry, it needs to be nonpartisan. The banking industry in the U.S., which is the largest lobbying group at every level, from federal to state to municipality level, plays both sides. They don't care who's in power in the U.S. They're not partisan. Their party is money, and the printing and the using of greenbacks in the U.S. And so eventually it has to become a nonpartisan issue in the U.S. as the lobbying kind of eases it out, and some people retire from politics, as they say. And so if it can become nonpartisan in the U.S. and it can become nonpartisan in Canada, I think North America in general can really take back what it's been shipping overseas. I mean, I deal with a lot of Swiss companies and things going on in Europe, and they're so happy. They're like, we're so happy that the U.S. is a dumpster fire for regulation right now because it's benefiting us so well. And it is. But I know with the innovation that goes on in the U.S. And in Canada, and groups like yours and the similar ones going on in the U.S., it can be a powerhouse. I mean, the innovation happens too fast in crypto, and it happens fast in North America. And so I think it can be a good thing.
Faster than any regulator will keep up with. That's one of the things that we're going to notice here. It's the speed of innovation versus the speed of implementation. I'm not sure we're ever going to get to a point where the crypto industry and the regulatory industry are moving at the same pace. I think we're always going to see new innovation in crypto and regulators not quite struggling, but the education required for anything new to come in. And right now it's kind of like square peg round hole. It's like you see this massive disruption in financial innovation, and regulators are going, okay, but we have this box. And this is the box that we know and that we're comfortable with. And this is where you need to fit. And it's like, okay, but based on where the technology sits, many of your regulations are antiquated to this new technology that's coming out. So there needs to be a gap that's filled. And right now, right now it's at a point where, especially in the States, companies are coming in trying to work with regulators, trying to work with lawyers, and they're not really getting very far because there's not enough of that industry consultation where they're willing to learn. The regulators need to be more willing to learn, and they're adding ridiculous things. Like they almost completely dismantled the mining industry in the States just based on their infrastructure bill.
Right.
Yeah.
It was like, right.
You'll destroy an entire industry. Like you brought in $3.6 billion in GDP value to the state of Texas within 5 years. That number has definitely grown, but it took 5 years to bring that in. There's not a lot of other industries that are going to bring in that level of value and investment in a short period of time just by saying, hey, our doors are open for you.
Can I almost want you to almost talk about the idea of the growth aspect of traditional finance, right, in comparison to the laws that come about, right? There's always a gap, and this is more of a statement and then a question that's going to follow it. And then the next part
Pedro's good
is,
at this.
yeah, and I apologize behind this. I know I don't mean to make my questions lengthy, but then you have crypto, which is lightning quick compared to traditional finance, right? Which is like, it's like a little kid sprinting and a full-on Olympic sprinter, right? That's the difference between TriFi and DeFi. So I'm bringing this
Right.
up because, do you think, and this is one of the things that's been percolating in my mind, is there's so many industries that basically waste energy. So like from the steel industry, from like you said, truckers burning through that. Do you think it would be smart for crypto inventors and miners to almost set up traditional mechanisms, like, let's say, create a type of mining system that is attached to the regulator of a car, or have an air filter system that could actually be developed in a way that could be on top of, let's say, a steel mill that is going through and creating steel, where you have
Well,
all that
flare
excess.
gas is a good example of that. Koleya, I think you guys in Alberta have addressed the mining rigs, natural gas farms, even the big compressors that move natural gas around have waste to them, and they burn off flare gas. And I think people are even starting to convert that into Bitcoin mining. I think I saw something about that recently.
Waste to energy is something that's been going on for a while. So if I'm understanding the question, traditional finance is creating, it's cumbersome, it's slow, and it creates a lot of waste, where you're looking at decentralized finance is quick and agile and can take that waste and turn it into a value proposition. Is that kind of the encompassment of this question?
Yeah. So with that, do you think that actually traditional finance would actually adopt that and say, let's use this as a way to actually bring in alpha into traditional businesses?
Well, that's a very good point, or question.
Yeah.
I would say that traditional finance has been operating in much of the same methodology for
100 years.
A few hundred years. Like, you look at quantitative easing, and when that started coming out, like, you're looking at Medici families from Florentine times, like early days. And when we once had a gold standard, and we, like, to me, if we're going to talk about like the value of crypto and this lightning fast movement versus this traditional finance, it's a debt mechanism focused on Keynesian economics to force people into giving up their savings, tax people to the point where they are incentivized to spend so they don't have savings, and create a debt economy to which people are, this is just a new plantation, right? It's just like slavery is not really abolished. They've just changed it into a methodology where the elites get rich off of us working our butts off, paying 40% of our taxes to a traditional finance system that encourages us to get into debt. And they think, oh, owning a house is the epitome of adulthood. It's just like, that home is not an investment. That home does not make you money unless you have multiple properties and you're renting them out. Like, the mechanisms that they've used for Austrian economics are, to me, just another form of slavery. Where when I look at crypto, I specifically just look at Bitcoin, because many of the other cryptos focus similarly on Keynesian economics. It's just more spend theory. They can produce as much of that crap as they want. Why would I trust a crypto CEO versus the CEO of, or the prime minister of Canada? Like, I'd rather, like, at least I know the devil I'm getting with the Prime Minister of Canada versus, the CEO of Ethereum. With Bitcoin, you're focused on Austrian economics. You're focused on sound money. You're focused on a principle of the gold standard. It's the soundest money the world has ever seen, and it's the only money the world has ever seen with phone scarcity, as well as, the fact that it cannot be manipulated, and it counts as all forms of money. I don't really focus on a lot of the cryptos out there. Our organization, we don't get into Ripple and all the other ones. If we do educate, we educate on Bitcoin because it's commodity versus a security. But if the banking sector were to adopt sound money practices and stop the quantitative easing and the constant production of debt in our M1, M0, M2 money supply, all of that, wow, could we shift the economy? Will they do that? Absolutely not. What they're going to introduce, and they're going to utilize some of the issues of blockchain, or not issues, but the values of blockchain, and they're going to create their CBDCs, which will be lightning fast. They can produce as much of it as they want, and they're going to take their traditional way of doing things, add more layers of technology onto it, keep spreading that out, and we're only going to get more and more and more into this wonderful debt crisis that we see.
Right.
So I don't see traditional finance moving away from the age of the dinosaur. Like personally, it's like it's going to be years. The ones that do, the banks that do, I think are going to, have incredible opportunities long term. But I think people are starting to wake up to the fact that their money's becoming worthless globally, right? They're starting to wake up to the fact that their money can be manipulated easily. I mean, 200 times Canada's money in supply happened during COVID. And people are looking at like the inflation rates on that are astronomical, and it hasn't even truly
hit.
Right?
I agree, 100%.
I don't even think it's measured correctly. Right? It's
yeah.
not.
Well,
and on that, go ahead.
Metrics. I was going to say, listen, because of the metrics and actually how here in America we see that very quick, right? That it's changed almost 15 times over. I'm going to say I use that as just an exorbitant amount of number, but it's changed so many times for the metrics to gauge the economy that it literally lies. It lies to itself over multiple times. So with that, like jumping back to this idea that the world is basically poor in a rich society, right? Like even though I've got clean running water that I can poop in, I have a hard time feeding my kid, right? Like in America.
That's a problem all over the world. They don't all have the clean water.
I was going to say clean water is a luxury of the first world class. I mean, we have issues because I don't have Wi-Fi and there's a meltdown in the car, right? So that's a first world issue. What I'm talking about here is the idea of blockchain kicking in and actually establishing a real efficiency within a traditional market, and then in additionally to that, seeing.
You mean like in Africa and the poorer places of the world? Can blockchain help that?
No, I'm just elaborating on what you said. But long story short, you talked about the debt thing, or it being like 40% increase. The idea behind like 200% increase in inflation isn't even really a real number, because again, we're based off a debt system that can still balance itself off of it. With Bitcoin, right?
There's no balancing on that. There's no balancing on that. They increase their money in circulation by 200 times, and they're printing more money and increasing the debt ceiling for it. They can't print enough money to get themselves out of debt at this point because they're decreasing the value of whatever that cash is. It's basically monopoly money.
And imagine how fast they could do that with a CBDC.
But you're missing the point. Here's the thing. When I poop in clean water. A third world country. This is what I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to get there. If in a world where there's only Bitcoin, and I've thought this through, in a world of Bitcoin only that we're dealing with, if you have a financial crisis where something happens, you can't push money, you can't create credit and debt, how do you actually have real air quote growth? Because there's no money to pay people. So it's like if you potentially
I get your question. Let's simplify it. In a fixed supply economy, how do you create growth? And the trick is, from my perspective, you create value. Right?
Yeah.
No. Here's the thing with that. Okay, so sir, for 5,000 years, we had a gold standard. We had, you only spent what you had, and your money was stable. So if I was an 1800s farmer and I was making $1 a month, buying a hut was probably $5 whole, but I would save for a whole year and I'd be able to go buy that hut. When you have sound money, you have time preference. You know your money is going to have value over time. In the 1950s, people saved and bought a house. People saved and bought that whole car. Keynesian economics, which is what you're currently talking about, which is what you've been indoctrinated into, is spend theory. We have to give money to the economy to stimulate the economy, and every single economy that has ever happened in globally has collapsed because of it. Venezuela is a beautiful example of that. The government printed. Their value on the global stage went further down, to the point where
still going down.
They have so much money that if you don't cash in your paycheck that day, you can buy just that much less the next day. And Canada is doing the exact same thing. America is doing the exact same thing. Just imagine right now. So based on what you've just said, America has to increase its debt ceiling again, because America can only pay its debt by asking for more debt because they're stimulating the economy, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
What happens when they can no longer take on more debt? All of a sudden, every single service that's attached to them, from pensions to civil service, police, military, you name it, complete pandemonium and chaos because they spent more than they had. The kings of old had happy citizens when, if they were going to defend their land, they didn't send their military thousands of miles away, depleting their land and resources, depleting their coffers and taxing the shit out of their citizens, right? They stayed close. They kept their citizens happy. They kept them with days off. They kept their grains stored. When you spend what you have available to you and you can create value from that money, easy money is the worst thing that has ever happened on a global scale. You can be a billionaire in Zimbabwe, a billionaire, a trillionaire. You think you can buy a loaf of bread? No. Why do you think El Salvador had to adopt something like Bitcoin? It had more stability than their crap currency because they did the exact same thing. So you can't show me a single economy on a global stage that has done spend theory that has created any level of long-term value. When China increased its debt ceiling by 2%, it introduced $1.7 trillion and nobody freaking noticed. And guess what? They're creating funny money out of thin freaking air and loaning that funny money to America and Canada. Like, you want to talk about ESG right now, like the biggest hoax happening in ESG, where we're all virtue signaling that we have to have our electric cars and our solar and our wind farms. Guess where 90% of that stuff is made? China. 90% of that is coming out of China. When you owe the majority of your debt to the country, and one of their largest productions is renewable energy, they're trying to get you to step away from what resources you have in the ground and pay them back through virtue signaling ESG nonsense. It's actually creating a worse carbon footprint and more environmental damages. But follow the money. That's all you have to do. Sound money creates stability and a solid economy. So there's no example that anyone could give me that would shift my mind on that.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, I was almost setting you up to springboard for you to actually talk about. Like, I'm like, all right, tangent.
That was a long setup, I got to tell you.
Like, it's all good. It's just like, go for it. Like,
Pedro,
springboard.
I gotta stop you right now. We're reaching the end of the show, so we only got a few minutes left. But Koleya, I wanted, on the topic that he was talking about, I wanted to mention that one of the issues I discovered about the electric vehicle industry, and that, virtue signaling, as I said, the government here in Canada is pushing for this. They're pushing for it. We got to have all of this stuff done next week. Yet it takes them 25 years to approve a single lithium mining license, and other natural resources, like actual mining out of the earth, to create the batteries to do this. And so by saying we need to have electric vehicles by 2035 or whatever the date is, that hard date, they're actually saying we need to buy more stuff from China and send our money over there. And they've created a negative feedback loop where they say we need to do this, but they're making the problem worse.
But I think at the end of the day, it's almost a goal. It's actually a goal, and depending on what rabbit holes you go down, like I go down a couple, and I'm happy to look like the tinfoil hat person. But if you start thinking about,
I got Pedro's on your side for the tinfoil hat.
This is what I'm trying to push you there. I'm literally trying to push you there.
And everything within 15 minutes. You think you need a vehicle? They are trying to decrease the amount of vehicles on the road. Because guess what? Okay, like so many places you can go down. You have an EMP attack. There's not a single vehicle that was made past 1970 that'll stay on the frickin' road. So there's just one that's like eliminate all new vehicles. Electric vehicles gone to crap. There's no way a single grid in North America could handle the expansion of that many electric vehicles and the back order on it. You're basically going to be walking everywhere. But that is the goal, because if they stick you in a 15-minute city, you have your work, you have your gym, you have your Starbucks, you have all your modern conveniences, and you're going to be sitting there living in your office tower, eating bugs and, saying, and not owning anything and loving it and enjoying all the nonsense that comes out of it. And
don't forget about the chip in the hand. Don't forget about the chip in the hand. It's so easy.
All right, Pedro. All right.
Let's say,
we could go on for a long time about this, but you're right about the electric vehicles. They still have to build roads. They still have to plow cornfields down. They still have to do all that kind of stuff. It's just changing the engine management and it's just moving the energy generation from one area to another. I get that. But Koleya, we're running out of time here for the show, but I do want to get to what's coming up for the organization. Specifically, let me see if I can get this one right. Here, behind me on the screen is an event in November. The date isn't correct on it, but tell us about what's coming up for the Canadian Blockchain Consortium and the summit coming up.
Absolutely. So I will preface that some of the views I just stated are not our consortium's views. They're just myself personally.
Happens on these shows all the time.
We do it on purpose.
But our National Blockchain Summit, it's our 3rd annual one, and we really dive into some of the key topics that are impacting the ecosystem today. Like one of my favorite topics going to be coming up is talking about the halving. To me, the halving is one of the most substantial occurrences that happen every 4 years within this industry. It usually signifies when the next bull market's going to hit. About every 6 to 8 months after a halving, we usually start seeing that market run up. So we're going to be talking about what happens around that Bitcoin halving, how companies are kind of gearing up for that because they're going to be, getting the same bill, same cost to operate, but half the amount of profitability through it. So what does that look like? What does that mean? And we're going to have topics on stable coins because those are big ones coming up right now. A lot of conversations happening with that. We're going to be talking about like the regulatory landscape in Canada, how that's going to be impacting crypto companies, right? So lots of really good, very meaningful conversations. Liquid staking is another one that we have there. So it's going to be a one-day event hosted at Osler's office, which we're really grateful for, having really key conversations impacting the space. It's going to have lunch. It's going to have an evening cocktail reception with appetizers and wine. So great day. A lot of our executives from the space nationally come out for it. So definitely worth attending. We're going to have to move it to the end of the month, just some issues with office scheduling right now. But stay tuned. We'll have our new dates up hopefully in the next couple of days.
All right. While you were talking, I was putting up a bunch of tweets and other comments from people regarding some of your past events and things like that. You've been very busy with this, and especially as the political cycle heats up and the educating the legislators type thing kind of heats up, and it looks like you're going to be quite busy for a while as we get into dealing with the tinfoil hat conspiracies and bringing the real message in front of every MP, MPP, MLA, and all those. As the American, I'm trying to get those terminologies right. Trying to get it to educate them in order to really let these industries flourish and get the mining industry going. Get the focus on a better money supply than just the printing press. And so I applaud you for being a champion of these topics and dealing with the knowledgeable people and dealing with the knuckleheads in the industry that to advance our cause. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Koleya Karringten for being on the show. We had a good time today. I think we had a little better time than we planned for this topic. Pedro, thank you for the long-winded comments that led to a great discussion about which rabbit hole we want to go down. And appreciate that. As Koleya mentioned, the views of the guests are not always those of the organizations they work for. People's views stand on their own. Yes. And you can't hold anything she says against her until it turns out that she was right in the end.
Oh, we're all
but
right.
anyway, before we go, Koleya, any last thoughts about this wonderful world we're in here?
Let's see. I would say that for doing your own research, best thing you can start doing is researching into Bitcoin. Read the Bitcoin Standard by Seyfedina Moose. He's absolutely a brilliant economist. Had him speak at a number of events now. It's a perfect start to a rabbit hole to go down. To me, like if you have any concerns whatsoever about your fiat currency system, looking into sound money and Bitcoin is definitely a good gateway into seeing how you could, potentially protect yourself from financial crisis.
All right, I could talk at length about that forever, but we've run out of time. Koleya, stick around for just a second here. I'm going to run the show ending credits here. Everyone, thank you thank you everybody for joining us today. Whether you are on the live, we're on about 6 different platforms here. We only had about 40 people or so tune in over those different platforms. As I say, not a lot on the live, but what we like to really do is focus on the replays of this. And we've made some good comments here today. We'll try and break out into social media, but share them with your friends, like, subscribe, follow, all that type of stuff to really get this stuff out. The algorithms are not happy right now with crypto, the term DYOR and that type of stuff. And so I got to break it out by having everybody like this, forward it on, share and subscribe and all that. But anyway, as I always say, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Striking here in the digital media world. I'm the host of DYOR Live. There's a new episode of Rugged, Ruined, and Wrecked Out. Go find it on the internet on my channel. It's awesome. I use education and entertainment to teach everyone what happened badly in crypto and the digital asset world. And for all of my guests, thank you. We will see you again next week, so be there.